My name is Natalie. I am a mom. I'm a teacher. I run an organization called Hip Hop Congress, and that's who I am. So, my experiences dealing with the mental health system have not been great. Um, as a community organizer and a person who's definitely a problem solver, every time that I'm in that position, I'm trying to rebuild it because there are so many flaws. And I feel like a lot of the flaws add trauma to existing crisis. And that's been my experience. Both of my daughters have had experiences in the mental health system, and myself as an advocate have had many experiences in the mental health system. As I see it, there are three parts to responding to a mental health crisis, and that's the first response. So that's when you call someone to come out because you can't handle the situation. There's nothing you can do at home with family, and so you call for help. And maybe someone's going to hurt themselves or hurt someone else, so you call for help. That's a whole process. Then the next part of it is if you do indeed get a 5150 hold, there's the whole experience at the hospital. So that's another part of it. And then a really important part as well is the follow-up and the follow-through of this mental health crisis. So in that first responder setting, generally speaking, the local police department comes out. They kind of assess the situation and take the person who's having the crisis to the local emergency room. Then at the emergency room, there is a very long wait because we're waiting for the mental health person to come and assess whether it's a 5150, whether we need a hold. So we're waiting for that person. If it's after hours, it could be like 24 hours waiting in the emergency room during a mental health crisis. During COVID, this is particularly a problem because our experience that we had was my daughter having to wait in the hallway on a bed during a mental health crisis. So you're already traumatized. You're exposed to everyone. The nurses and doctors are fairly inconsistent. So some will say you can have a blanket or you can have a comfort item. Some will say you're not allowed to have anything. You can't wear your clothes. You can't wear your sweats. And so there's a lot of inconsistent rules, and rules that they're generally made so you don't hurt yourself in that setting, but it's kind of arbitrary because you still could hurt yourself in the hospital room. And so if you're denying someone of their blanket because you think something bad is going to happen with them having their comfort item, that's just not the best way to comfort someone in a mental health situation. And mind you, this is probably heightened from whatever happened to cause the call in the first place, right? And so now you're in this situation. You're in this hospital. You're waiting and waiting. And at first you might think it's a good idea, like, okay, I'm going to get help, right? But, around hours 5 or after 10 hours, then you might freak out again. You might have, a breakdown episode because it's not the ideal place for a young person to wait during a mental health crisis. It just isn't. It's inconsistent. They usually have a guard watching the door, and I understand safety precautions, but also they can't be arbitrary. They can't be like, here's this safety precaution, but there's these things that you could totally hurt yourself with in the hospital room, So that process is terrible. The mental health person who sees if you're going to be put into a mental health facility should be a first responder, not a first responder 24 hours later. They should be there as soon as the police officers are. Because, fortunately in our town, I haven't had a terrible experience with the police officers being first responders, but there's only so much they can do. And the one that you're waiting for is this first line worker in the mental health system who may or may not be there. They should be there when the cops are, is my opinion of the situation. Our personal experience, the recent one where my daughter went in during COVID, when the person finally got there to assess the situation, I had let them know my daughter had been previously hospitalized at a specific facility. And when she was hospitalized there, it was back when you could have visits. And so we would visit, and she would literally show us everything she could hurt herself with in the room. Supervision was really low. There was a lot of sharp items in the rooms. Fortunately, that hospitalization, she wasn't really into doing any kind of self-harm. She wasn't extremely suicidal. And so that's, she survived it, right? And so what I let this first responder, the mental health worker who eventually came, I said, I'm not comfortable with her going to this particular hospital because she's far more suicidal right now. She has tried to hurt herself. And I know she can hurt herself in this hospital. So please try to find a different one. And there were some things said like, oh, there may or may not be a bed. You may have to go really far away. Sutter goes to Sutter. Oops, did I say the name? And so we ended up being transferred to that same facility. When we got there, so as an advocate, as a mom, I talked to the staff. There were about 3 staff there. And I let them know that the last time my daughter was there, it was unsafe, and I was very concerned about her hurting herself. And I really thought that she was in that state of mind where she would try to find ways to hurt herself. They kind of just looked at me. It was like zombie land. I'm telling you, it was not received well, my concerns. And I mean, they were very, very stone-faced, you couldn't really detect compassion or just that they even heard what I was saying, which was legitimate. It was, last time we were here, she showed me how she could hurt herself. This time we're here, I think she's more suicidal. I need you to watch her very carefully and make sure that she's okay, because otherwise, why are we here, right? And so we left very uncomfortably. It was very uncomfortable. It felt like I didn't know where I was leaving my daughter. And I should have felt that she was safer, and she wasn't. She knows more of what went on within the facility. She would call me crying a lot. There was no real therapeutic services in there, which you would think that would be something that was included in this, some sort of help while you're there. I mean, you're there for 3 to 7 days or whatnot, and so I really think the most work that could be done in that time to help who's there should be done, but it was more like a shitty daycare. Like, they did not supervise well. So my daughter would call me and she would be upset. The staff wasn't treating her very, very kind, and she felt like she was being treated differently from the other kids there. And she had the ability to lock herself in her room for like 45 minutes at a time. She ended up hurting herself, as I was worried about, cut her arm all up and down with things she had found in the unsafe room, where she was not being supervised because I think staff ended up having a beef with her. And she'll explain it like the young people that are in these facilities, they're not being bad. They're going through like the worst time of their life, right? And so you really want compassionate people in there. You want people that are going to keep them safe. I know we had another interview through this project where a counselor was saying the hospital is not what people think it is. Like you think you're going to, I don't know, what are they, psychiatric hospital, and you're going to get help, and here's your resources, and there, now you have your help, right? And that's not what it is. And it was traumatic. It was so traumatic that I felt unsafe keeping her there, but she wasn't ready to come home. Like, she still was going through a lot, right? And, I do believe that if medication is a thing that works for someone, it is good to do that in a hospital setting. So she's also, trying different medications, which I think it's safer to be watched under those situations. Plus, she didn't feel safe to come home. Fortunately, we found out something that they don't really tell you, but that there's a psychiatric facility that you can walk into and they won't turn you away. And so you could literally skip to the emergency room, skip the calls to the police, and you can drive straight to the hospital. And I talked to them about that, and I just knew that I had to get my daughter out of there. And everyone I talked to, from doctors to social workers to trying to get a hold of patients' rights advocates, it was not productive. Like they weren't willing to listen and keep my daughter safe. Like when I finally got heard, it was when we left. The day we left, they finally had me talk to someone with some authority, and I told her, and she's like, "Oh my God, you should have come to me first." I was like, "No one told me. I thought the social worker was the person you talked to. No one told me who to talk. You didn't ask to talk to a manager." I was like, "My name's not Karen, but shit, maybe I should have." But and so I end up finally talking to someone who cared, or could at least compassionately listen and understand the situation. And then I talked to a bigger manager who was, seemed appalled at what went on in the facility. But I was like, we've got to get out of here. This is not safe. So we end up going to the new facility, and within like minutes of being there, there's a whole new vibe. I had told you how when we went to the other one, it was like zombie land. Like, do you speak my language? Please keep my daughter safe. And it just wasn't well. You can tell when that's happening to you. Happens a lot in the healthcare system and in mental health. People stonewall, and it's a terrible way to treat people who are vulnerable with either medical issues or mental health issues. This place was compassionate. They were kind upon entry. We came in and we both were made feel comfortable. We were made feel safe. The guy in there, Winters, like we'll never forget him, because he was like kind and compassionate and cared. And I think my daughter told on her interview, like we both started crying. We're like, oh my gosh, maybe she'll be safe. Maybe she'll get the help she needs. So that facility had some caring staff, had more of they wouldn't let her sleep all day, which is what they did at the other place, which if you know anything about, depression, like that's not what you're really supposed to do to get through it. So there was definitely a better experience there. Doctor wasn't great. A lot of times a lot of people are mandated reporters through for CPS, and usually doctors and counselors. And so when they're getting to know you, my daughter had shared something that happened like literally a million years ago. Like, I mean, okay, not literally a million years ago, many, 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 many years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And because that's helpful for the doctors to know, right? It was something that had already been taken care of and forgotten about. And the doctor called CPS. And so we get a CPS call and they're like, have you handled this? And, you know, truthfully, we had blocked it out of our mind because that's a whole other system that you don't want to deal with. A lot of times in these systems, there are ways, the right way to do things, you know, oh, you do this, you call this, you get help here, you get resources here. But the truth is our society and these systems are just as dysfunctional as our families. So they are not the answer, you know. And so anyway, protocol, she calls, even though it was 10 years ago, even though it was handled. So my daughter had to relive what happened. And it was unnecessary. It was unnecessary. And then it really prevents, while I believe no one should be in an abusive situation, no one should be getting abused, hurt sexually, there are times to call CPS, but I think there's a real problem with mental health systems and counseling situations where a lot of people aren't going to talk about the real issues because it could result in a CPS call. Now you're in the system. Now you're getting help, maybe, maybe not. And so instead of just being able to work through those issues, they want to make a big deal out of it. You know, when really what matters is that individual being able to work through those issues, being able to talk to someone about it, being able to be honest. That's my only gripe with that place. My daughter was still not ready when the time was up at that facility. So we started looking into residential type treatment centers. What I learned through the process is the help that I wanted her to get was definitely not given there. Again, it's bad babysitters at the first place. And the second place was a little better, but it really wasn't educational enough for her to learn how to deal with what was going on with her. So we started looking into residential treatments, found some fantastic places. I even was ready to go out of my comfort zone and be like, you can go to this place in Las Vegas because we have a connection there. And it sounded great. They're learning about nutrition and just these things that I feel like can help people naturally in the mental health realm of their lives. It sounded fantastic. They don't take Medi-Cal. They don't take poor people insurance. So I'm like, okay, well, I could invest a little money. How much is it? It's like $50,000 to get a month of good care. And so at that point, you're like, well, I guess treatment's only for people who are wealthy. And that's where society, we act like we care about the children. We act like we care about the youth, but which youth, which children? So we looked into a few others, and it was very similar scenarios. And so we ended up just coming home and making plans. And in the end, I don't know that they did any better than I would have. I know people. I know, nutritionists. I know counselor friends. I know, and in the end, I feel like they didn't do any better than I could have. And that's scary because I didn't know what to do. I'm not a mental health professional. But sometimes the help you get needs to be yourself. But not everyone can do that. That's why we're here doing this project. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone can advocate. Not everyone knows a nutritionist and a counselor and, all of Auburn, Placer County. Not everyone knows that. And so I think there's a dire need for change. And I don't think that it's not, I think it's realistic. I think it can be done. I think we're smart enough and we can put it all on the table, and instead of talking about why we can't change, talk about how we can change. We can problem solve, we can shift money, we can do it. And it could be as simple as getting that first line worker there immediately, like the police officers. It could be as simple as, the hospital's striving for excellence, making that time count. You're taking this time and you're supposed to keep the kids safe, like make that time count. It can be as simple as young people having access to find the counselor that works with them. Like if you have personality clashes, it's a deep relationship between a person and their counselor. That's a deep relationship. You're telling them, like, bearing your soul, right? You have to like them. You have to vibe with them. And if you're poor, you don't get that luxury. You don't get to shop around for counselors. And that matters. And it just sucks. It sucks that we say, oh, we have resources, get help, talk to someone. Yeah, but do we? And then, okay, last part of the equation, knowing that the entrance into the system looks like this, do I want help? Do I want to go through this? Where did I end up anyway? Me doing it. Me figuring out the plan for my daughter. Do I want to bother? Am I judged as a parent because I don't call 911 and get help or utilize resources that suck? I don't know. So that, I think I've said what do you have any questions? No, I wasn't aware that I knew systems were broken, but I didn't know how broken. I didn't know that I could send my daughter from an unsafe situation at home to an unsafe situation somewhere else and call that getting help. I didn't know that. In fact, I was shocked the whole way. I was shocked that I knew what to do to protect my daughter by telling those people, hey, I want you to watch her so she doesn't hurt herself. And that they looked at me like I was crazy, I'm shocked there wasn't books in the facilities either. I ended up going to Barnes & Noble, figuring out whatever disorder it could be. I got workbooks. I got, everything, like even fun ways to deal with stuff, cognitive therapy books. And when I took them to my daughter in the facility, I was like, I bet the kids here would like to learn about what's going on with them. I bet they might like some, books. There should be a library here. That's a simple thing that could be done. I know, and this could be off record, but I know that Sutter has funded some of my projects. Why don't they get a fucking library for their mental hospitals? Like, you can give me $1,000, I thank you, but why don't you improve your services first? I just like books. Anyway, so that'll be cut out with the F word. There's a really cool service called Therapeutic Behavioral Services, but you cannot access those without going through the county. services, which I'm skeptical. I mean, from what I've experienced, like, I don't want to play. I don't want to be in that system. I don't trust that system. I know TBS is a great service, though, and I really wanted to get it straight out of the hospital, but we didn't have access to it because I was being stubborn, I guess. But I don't. It's hard to trust these systems, and it's like, do you continue to get traumatized when you're already in crisis, or do you figure it out on your own? You know, it's a good point because when you do go into these facilities, medicine is the first thing. They shove all kinds of drugs down your throat, like, and don't necessarily tell you what the aftermath of that is. So some antidepressants cause like violent withdrawal, meaning it could be less safe than you were in the first place if you just forget to take your meds for a couple of days. To wean off of them, some of them it will take literally 6 weeks. And I found myself always asking the doctors, I mean, I see a place for medicine where there's a place for medicine. However, I found myself always asking the doctors, what do you know about vitamins? What do you know about some natural ways? And I really think it's like this or this. Like, you either are having, pharmaceuticals or completely holistic. But I really do feel like doctors, psychiatrists should know some natural things to do to help, because you can try them, and if they don't work, maybe try the medicines, but they're just very quick to give you all the drugs. In fact, I think that's the hospital experiences give you the drugs and a vacation away from home with all the drugs. So yeah, and there's different types of therapy too, but again, we're looking at access. So we're looking at, can you afford that? Just that. My advice is for mental health decision makers to talk to people who've had experiences in this system, much like we're doing with this project. I mean, I guess we can do it for them, but to really identify the common themes of what's not working, what's not ideal for someone in a mental health crisis, and change it. Like, it is not impossible to change. And no bureaucracy, no red tape, no lack of funding should be a reason that we don't provide better care for the people.
I think that's it.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll throw one in, and it may be a bonus.
And then we'll do the school one too again. We might as well just do that. Okay.
Gotcha. On the medication question, I was just wondering if you think that, what was my question? So,
Before you continue, can I just take a quick laugh before I sit down?
Yes.
hi, Rob.
Hi, Noah. Hi, Aurora.
I didn't want to interrupt, but hello, everybody. Hello.
With, shoot, what was the question? Okay, sorry. With medication, do you think that, I do this all the time to jar my thoughts. So do you think that they're quick to prescribe? It's not to say that, I'm not trying to question or over scientific this thing, but I know that like we've felt in the past that they were quick to prescribe something that was more psychoactive or more extreme, like elite to first, before even really getting to know, you know?
Oh, yeah, they medicate immediately.
But I mean, before we even went through the hospitals, I think with the counselor services that the county tried to provide, they were quick to try to give
I'm not sure. Abilify to make,
Abilify or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I don't want to really
Okay.
talk about that, but yeah, that's way back. But yeah, they're always quick to drug you, and the popular drugs. Just so you know, like the popular ones are definitely the ones that are getting prescribed, and yeah. So with the medications and being so quick to prescribe them, it's a dangerous journey, and I feel like you should really be very educated and not always take what the doctor says, and not always not trust the doctor. But right now we've found a really good psychiatrist that listens to us, and is helping us wean off the drugs that we had to use because of the hospital experience. So we have a good person now, but you really do need a good doctor next to you because it's dangerous. It's dangerous to start the drugs. There's something called a black box warning. The first 4 weeks you can become like suicidal and homicidal on top of probably being suicidal. So you don't even know if it's going to work for 4 weeks, which is crazy, right? And so it's a journey, and it's unsafe to get off of them. Sometimes you can be more suicidal and depressed and actually try to harm yourself because you forgot to take your medicine. And teenagers might forget to take their medicine. Adults might forget to take their medicine, and that's some scary stuff. That's like big drug addiction. But I tried to get help. I'm doing this for my mental health, but it's so hella dangerous. So my advice to parents who are experiencing the mental health system with their young people is to be an advocate, to listen to your kids, find some other parents who've gone through it. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And if you don't have experience being an advocate and doing the research to make sure that your rights are honored, or your child's rights are honored, find someone who can help you, because it's a struggle. Like it's not easy.